I'm gonna cut in. I'm gonna cut into the baseball talk here and ask some basketball questions and possibly and even some Hawks
Please do.
questions. Nice to meet you, Ling. And I mean, the first question I want to ask is about Josh Smith. I love Josh Smith, and I think that he's a player who helps teams win games. But for some reason, the conversation about him, the context around him, always seems to be negative. And it's about trading Josh Smith and about how the trade deadline, the Hawks need to trade Josh Smith. Is this something that has to do with him, or is this us valuing the wrong things in basketball and not properly valuing the defense that he brings to the table?
I think it's funny when you talk about Josh because the first couple years, like that first year when they won 13 games, his first few years, he was just pretty much a high flyer, and that was all he did. And he had some amazing dunks. He even more than the dunks, he had some amazing missed dunks where he would try to like dunk over three guys or jump from a foot inside the free throw line. He did all kind of crazy stuff that you don't really see guys try all that often. And it was fun to watch from that perspective. Once the Hawks started winning games and Josh kind of matured a little bit, I think it's really more about how the Hawks try to figure out how to use him. He takes a lot of those jumpers that drive fans crazy, and you hear the fans in Phillips Arena when when Josh pulls up for the 20-footer. That 2 seasons ago, he had the year where he only attempted something like 4 or 5 3-pointers for the whole year. That was pretty effective year for him, and then they went to Larry Drew this year. So I think it's really about trying to get Josh in a place where he's comfortable, where the team's comfortable using him. Maybe that means putting him in the post more because he very rarely do you see Josh down in the post. I think a good start would be don't have him spot up at the 3-point line. Put him in other places and try to find places where he can be more effective.
Yeah, and you mentioned how the crowd they tend to react every time Smith takes a jumper. So the Atlanta crowd seems very knowledgeable, but they're sort of reputed to be somewhat of a dead crowd, and they don't get as many sellouts as you think they would get. Hollinger is always taking shots at the atmosphere down there at the Highlight Factory. Do you think the Hawks are under-supported, and if so, why do you think that is?
I think they're a little under-supported, but I think it's kind of like the Braves actually. That the Braves won the division 15 years in a row and had trouble selling out playoff games. There's a couple of things there. Number one, Atlanta is different than a lot of the other cities in the NBA and in other sports in that they have baseball, basketball, pro football, college football, and NASCAR. And those are all things that draw a lot of people to a lot of different things. There's a lot of things pulling on people's expendable income. So I think for most fans going to 41 games might be asking a little much for some of them, especially the casual fans. Hardcore fans are going to come. But I also think that it's tough when you're a team like the Hawks and you're going to play the Heat or the Celtics or the Lakers or these teams that are pretty definite upper echelon teams, and you're not there, and the Hawks in a 7-game series probably aren't going to beat the Heat or the Celtics or whoever. So I think there's a little bit of pragmatism from the Hawks fans where they look at that and they're like, well, maybe I don't know. But to look against that, I mean, against the Bulls last year in the playoffs, when they won the game in Chicago and came back to Atlanta, that crowd was loud. I was at those games, and they were very loud, very into it. And I think when there's something real at stake there, the people kind of rise to the occasion. But I don't know how often that happens.
What move do you think they need to make to get out of that the stagnation where they're moderately successful but not contending? What do you think is next for them to get up to that next point?
Well, forever they've needed like some sort of point guard who can penetrate. Mike Bibby, as good as he was at spotting up and that kind of stuff, he wasn't a penetrating point guard. And turns out we had Jeff Teague the whole time sitting on the bench for the last year and a half. And if Teague can keep playing like he played in the playoffs, I think that helps a lot. They obviously need some depth, another big man, and I would think if Heinrich is healthy again, that's a big help because that gives them some depth in the backcourt. But I think they got a lot of guys. I think once they hopefully they pick up another big guy to kind of spell Zaza and Al, or even someone who could move Al over to the four, that could be helpful too. But I mean, it's not like there's a ton of 7'3" bruisers hanging around out there that they can just go pick up.